ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ತಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಮತ್ತೆ ಸ್ವಾಗತ. Ladies and gentlemen, Invest Karnataka 2022 Global Investors Meet, and the focus this year is on Build for the World. Together we make it happen. This is Karnataka. And now we have this panel discussion on future of energy. This prelude says, technology integration in the energy sector is one of the most important differentiating factors for creating a green future for tomorrow's smart cities. Well, ladies and gentlemen, with the proliferation of EVs, geothermal energy and other renewable sources, yes, the aim is no longer to just create awareness on the adverse effects of pollution, but also to focus on promoting the use of environmental friendly and sustainable energy solutions. So the focus light will be on reinventing the energy ecosystem, future of energy generation in the world. May we have our esteemed speakers on the dais, please, now. First, this session will be moderated by Fellow and Director, Research Coordination at the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, Mr. Karthik Ganesan. Mr. Karthik Ganesan on the dais. Hearty welcome to you, sir. And our distinguished participants. Additional Chief Secretary, Energy Department, Government of Karnataka, Shri G. Kumar Nayak. Most warm welcome to you, sir. CEO of Petronas Hydrogen, Shri Adlan Ahmad. Hearty welcome to you, sir. Joining us next, ladies and gentlemen, MD and CEO of Hitachi Energy in India and SA, Shri Venu Nuguri. Warm welcome to you, sir. Leader, Renewable Energy at RIL, Shri Kapil Maheshwari. Thank you, sir, for joining us. And the MD of MRN Group, Shri Vijay Nirani. A warm welcome once again to all the speakers on the dais.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to have such a big auditorium listening on a very important topic of energy. I actually didn't have Mr. Nayak on the panel. I'm guessing, it's very important that we have the administration of the state represented here. So before we perhaps start the panel discussion, Mr. Nayak, I'll perhaps hand over very briefly to you to sort of give a sense of, what you see Karnataka's role, as the leader of the energy revolution in India. For those of you who are not familiar, Karnataka is perhaps the leading state when it comes to installed capacity as well as generation of renewable energy in the country. They're, of course, facing a lot of challenges scaling that because they are, front runners, so to say. Maybe we'll hear from Mr. Nayak first before we move on to our other panelists to discuss happenings around the country and around the world. Mr. Nayak, over to you. Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. In fact, our Honorable Minister, Mr. Sunil Kumar, should have been there in this program. So, for various reasons, he is not able to come today. So, I am batting for him. This is a global stage. Let's not try and dwell upon the problems and issues of Karnataka state. So, you are here to discuss very important issues and solutions for the problems that are being faced across the world, so to say. Definitely Karnataka would have experienced similar issues while implementing large-scale RE projects. To be very brief, let me tell you, as I agree with you that Karnataka is one of the leading states in integration of RE in our grid. Today, more than 50% of our installed capacity comes from the wind and solar put together. If you add the hydro, then it's almost 65%. So that's a huge chunk of our energy coming from the RE sources. As usual, we are gung-ho about adding RE, and we have added in a big measure. We are facing a lot of problems as on today. The grid stability, ability to absorb so much of energy that is being pumped in, financial health of the financial discoms, all these things are the issues that we are facing today. But we are now seeing that storage is perhaps the immediate and the only solution that can salvage the situation for me. The ESCOMs who have signed PPAs are forced to back down thermal energy, thereby the capacity utilization factor of the thermal plants going down, fixed costs piling up. All these things have become a huge problem for ESCOMs unless I have a storage solution. In Karnataka, we are looking at the hydropower stations, pumped hydro stations as our storage solutions. We have prepared the DPR for about 2,000 megawatts of project in Sharavati area. I'm sure you are familiar with that hydro project that we have in Sharavati, and adjacent to that, we would like to put up 2,000 megawatts of pumped storage facility, perhaps one of the cheapest projects in the country, because we have both the upper reservoir as well as the lower reservoir already there. We need to construct only the underground power station with the additional paraphernalia that is there. So this should be one of the cheapest and the most cost-effective kind of solution that we have. Similar, going forward, we should have such pumped hydro storage plants across the state. We are planning for that. We are planning for a PPPV tender coming out for about 1,000 megawatts. I encourage and I wish many of you to participate in that so that we get the most competitive bid. Going forward, we have anticipated or estimated the requirements of the state. Karnataka being one of the progressive and industrialized states, we expect our growth to be above the average for the country. So by 2032, if I translate everything into numbers, it might come to about nearly 1 lakh to 1.25 crores, 25 lakh crores of investment in various investments. And that is I hope it's a good news to you. I urge you to consider Karnataka as a destination for your investment. We are open. We have a very progressive government and equally quick bureaucrats. Quick bureaucrats, no, we are really quick. You can please come. We will be able to handle whatever that requires to be done. With this, I will wait for wonderful discussion that's going to come forward now. And of course, with most of you, we are in touch. You have been providing solutions to our issues for the last 2-3 decades. You continue to do so, Mr. Venu. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nayak, for those good introductory words. I think it's good to understand that Karnataka still intends to lead the charge going forward. So for those of you who didn't catch the participants, we have with us Kapil from Reliance sitting to the extreme right there. We have Venu, who's with Hitachi, which is the joint group today, Hitachi ABB. We have Adlan from Petronas, and we have Vijay Nirani from MRN Group, which is the bioenergy-based group. So basically, ethanol and bio-based energy is their forte. So we have a diversity of different sectors represented here, as you can see. We'll probably start with Kapil, because homegrown industry, everybody is looking to RIL to see what will the company do to push India towards energy sufficiency. To that extent, Kapil, your chairman made an announcement 2 years ago about 111, which is basically getting a kilogram of hydrogen at about $1, which can be a game changer for India. And as you know, that changes the way industrial heat is possibly looked at? Because today that's the biggest barrier. What preparations have gone in after that announcement has been made, to the extent that you're able to sort of disclose to this audience here, Kapil?
Thanks. Possibly, the whole vision of 111 is that India would be, for the first time, an net energy exporter. So we feel and demonstrate that India could be the #1 exporter of green hydrogen in next 1 decade, supplying to the world green hydrogen at $1 per kg. So that's how the vision of 111 was arrived at. Particularly if you talk of green hydrogen, at this moment also country consumes 6 to 7 million metric tons of hydrogen, which is largely gray. And people, even at the government of India, the target is that by 2030 we would be around 5 million metric tons of green hydrogen by 2030. We being producer and consumer of hydrogen ourselves have a vision that if we at Reliance want to be net zero by 2035, one of the key initiatives would be to figure out how do we decarbonize and take charge and control of our own GHG emissions and inventories. So the major step towards that, the good part towards the green hydrogen vision and mission, what the country is working. So February this year, there was an hydrogen policy by Government of India which was announced, and the hydrogen mission is probably at the verge of coming, which would, for the first time, even as part of policy, the country announced that we would be providing banking for projects and ISTS waiver for projects which are done before June 2025. And this is a very, very bold step, I would say. Even some of those developed countries haven't provided such an incentive to bank the renewable power and then use it for green hydrogen production. So that's a very, very progressive step towards announcing that policy. The second part of the mission, which would now be working more towards the demand creation, which was possibly missing in the whole policy which was announced in Feb, would now be coming, which would then derive for certain industries as to what green hydrogen compliance obligation could be. For the first time, I would see where we are, rest of the world is also there. So, we are no more going to be a follower. We have all the chance to become a leader in an industry which is just beginning. So there is no other country which is far ahead compared to us if we talk of green hydrogen, either in production, storage, transportation, or possibly in the downstream application. So everywhere from upstream, midstream, downstream, we have the whole system to look at in a very holistic way as in country, have a chance to put our global footprint ahead. In fact, I would say possibly many of the EU have been looking for around 10 million metric tons of imports. Many other countries would be looking at India. And why I say India has a chance and a benefit is because the majority of cost towards production of green hydrogen is the cost of renewable power. Now, this country has been working towards some of the lowest LCOEs by now already. So we have an ecosystem for large-scale renewable power plant. We have the manpower for large-scale, skilled manpower to execute those large-scale renewable power plant. We have the know-how is already produced for renewable and the hydrocarbon or the petrochem side of it. So this green hydrogen is in combination of both these things, and that is present in India already as a know-how and knowledge base. And at the same time, there is good amount of funding which is already available for any project which is touching climate change and impact. So, from all aspects, this provides us an opportunity compared to land, irradiation, and of course wind, and also the manpower and sources of funding. So probably we have all possible elements. To your question on how do we go towards that $1 thing, so as I said, one of the key elements to that would be how do we bring down the cost of renewable power, because that constitutes 60-70% in the whole hydrogen production chain. So how do we reduce the cost of renewable power? How do we make it more round-the-clock power from where it is intermittent power? Then the second aspect of it all would be relating to the electrolyzer. So how do we improve efficiencies of electrolyzers? How do we improve the lifetime what is there for the electrolyzer? How do we bring down the capex for electrolyzers? And how do we make sure that they are supplied with the full load hours? So is it possibly in combination of solar wind hybrid, possibly in combination of solar wind plus storage and offshore wind as well? So we are able to provide an electrolyzer as much round the clock power as possible. And then the next point, which I also said, would be the weighted average cost of capital. As we do more pilot projects, this would come and project finance would be simple. So keeping all these elements is where this kind of a vision would be quite possible for the country.
Thank you, Kapil. I think probably many in the audience are wondering, you keep hearing very often the story of hydrogen in the newspapers. You're probably wondering, what is it all about? It seems to be going back to the basics in some way, right? Hydrogen is a fuel that has been used in the past, but not in large enough quantities. As Kapil explained, it's basically taking electricity through water, splitting it, creating hydrogen and oxygen, so clean fuel. And as you know, India today imports more than 85% of the oil that it needs and 50% of the gas that we consume. So hydrogen is being seen as the fuel that will replace the oil and the gas eventually in many end applications. And I'll quickly sort of use that as a segue to come to Adlan here, who comes from Petronas, perspective from, well, a multinational perspective. Not that Reliance is not multinational, but you guys are obviously looking at the possibility of what hydrogen can deliver and what risks it poses to your conventional business, Adlan. And I also know that you are investing potentially in a, in Mangalore, right, in a hydrogen-based project. So what do you see as the role of alternative fuels like hydrogen in industry? Is it hype? Do you feel, it's too early to board that bus? Because everybody, I live in Delhi, and now the discussion's entirely shifted to hydrogen, right? It's like, let's forget about everything else, nat gas, we'll forget about it. Hydrogen is what we want to pursue. What are your thoughts on this?
Thank you very much. Maybe a bit of context. I think we were first approached about producing green hydrogen, green ammonia by our Japanese LNG buyers. I think this was in 2017, 2018. I think Japan, they're among the first few countries who came up with a policy to reduce carbon reduction by using hydrogen. And I think we realized very quickly that Malaysia does not have enough renewable energy to satisfy the demand that we can see coming from Japan, South Korea, for example. So that's, one more note is that Petronas also produces a lot of ammonia, but we produce ammonia from gas. Yeah, the hydrogen we get for ammonia is actually from gas, and most of our ammonia is used for urea. Yeah, so we have quite a bit of familiarity with the production and handling of hydrogen. So when we realized that there wasn't enough renewable energy in Malaysia to produce the hydrogen that's required, we quickly began to scan other countries. And I think there are countries that produces renewable energy even cheaper than India. The land in some countries are also cheaper than India. But India has got a lot of these factors which makes it possible for it to produce round-the-clock renewable energy at very good rates. And this is, of course, helped by the government policies and the ability for the country to also offer grid banking. Whether that is sustainable or not is something that we still have yet to see in the future. But we see other alternatives as well in India, like pump hydro is really coming up very strongly. So it's very important for all these factors to come together, because without, the strength of the grid, without banking, the proper storage, to make renewable energy available round the clock and at a rate which can produce hydrogen at a price that can make green ammonia attractive to the customers, I think only India and specifically Karnataka is one of those places that offer for an opportunity for us to at least make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Adlan, for taking us through. I think Adlan has given us a good view of where the hype in hydrogen is, how it potentially is the forming molecule for ammonia, which is much more easily transported. Hydrogen, for those of you who are uninitiated, not very easy to store because it has to be stored at pressure and that will take more energy. The pipes that we currently have for hydrogen as well, for natural gas, also do not allow for that transport very easily. So converting to ammonia and using the current shipping vessels is something that I think the likes of Petronas and many others are looking at. We've looked at the two emerging fuels. Venu, I want to come to you to sort of scale back and look at the system that we currently have today. And as Mr. Nayak said, Karnataka has done fairly well in managing RE. But if you've been reading through, the proceedings across the different regulatory commissions across the country, every state utility is out there saying, no more RE, please. Right? I'm up to my neck in trying to manage the way it comes into the grid. What do you think India is not doing enough of in terms of the way it manages RE inflow into the grid better? I mean, you guys provide a lot of the technology that helps get the RE into the grid. So some views on what states like Karnataka and others can do better, Venu.
So thank you, Karthik. Good afternoon, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here. So let me just give a view from the global standpoint, and then I come to India and specifically to Karnataka. If you really look at the global view, the energy transition is accelerating every part of the geography, whether you talk about the Europe, Americas, in Asia, Middle East, Africa, and everywhere the energy transition is accelerating day by day in that. The destination of this transition is very clear. It's a carbon neutral, powered by renewable and capable of electrifying everything and anything. These are the two very important. One is the renewable powering and electrifying anything and everything. That means the more and more electrification goes beyond what we are used to do it, whether it is a transportation, industries, etc. in that. So this puts the onus in a very big way to transition. So all the nations and every government, what they're doing, adapting the first one, the quick fix. Quick fix is to ramp up the renewable energy through solar. Because the solar, by virtue of the volume effect and technological development, the PV panels, the prices have come down from a dollar per kilowatt hour to a few cents per kilowatt hour, making itself is a business case. So country like us, its affordability is important when we are thinking about the new technologies, etc. So it's a quick fix, ramping up the solar plants at a gigawatt scales. In a few years back, the 600 megawatt was the biggest project done by Adani in Tamil Nadu in a single location, and which is already taken over by in Pavagada, which is one of the world's biggest 2,500 megawatt in a single location. So this is the scale of transition happening around the world and including in our state of Karnataka. What's important is also that how much of our grid resilience, our grid is resilient to take care of the penetration of the renewable, at what percentage of the thing. So there are a lot of studies have been done. For example, Denmark today almost close to 90% of that power through renewable. So the grid is already doing that. Another great example done by Mr. Kumar Naik and the team in Karnataka, that more than 50% in Karnataka is powered through the renewable, and the grid is resilient and grid is safe, and we have not seen any blockouts due to that in that. What is really required is that we need to look at the scenario not today, but 2050 scenario. If you're really looking at a net zero commitments by all the governments, etc., and the various reports of international agency, etc., what they are projecting today, global view is that today, 20% of global energy comes from the renewable and 80% of the fossil fuel. This is a global view. By 2050 scenario, it's the reversing. 20% only fossil, 80% is the renewable. It might vary depending upon geography, depending on a country, etc. in that. If that kind of scenario is what we need to start planning today, we are just talking less than 30 years. And what we are talking about, it is not talking about the incremental percentage, but in factor of many things in that. That needs a huge amount of technology to come into the grid state, resilient start point, and various other parts of the renewable alternatives solar alone will not be sufficient, but we need hydrogen carrier. We need many other things. And that kind of things, how do we ensure that the grid ramping up and ramp up is taking place in that? This is extraordinary thing there. The key is that the technologies are available, but the technologies to deploy at a scale and the speed required with that, Karthik.
Right. Thank you, Venu, for that. And finally, Vijay, to conclude our first round of comments, I guess we go from really future-looking energy to what we've had for many decades, but we've not really tapped. Your group looks at ethanol from biomass-based sources. At least, in the research space where I am, it's always held promise, but we somehow not managed to tap it to its full potential. What do you think is changing? I mean, I know in 2020, Minister Gadkari sort of started off this big campaign for looking at bioenergy in a big way in India. He talked about 2G bioethanol, right? But I haven't seen much happen in that space. So where do you see the role for bioenergy in the Indian ecosystem, specifically for power, but more broadly even in industry?
Thank you for this opportunity. And before we begin on this subject, I must give great regards to the government of Karnataka that they've hosted such a wonderful subject. And not just that, so we can see the proactiveness of the government of Karnataka is that we have already crossed the 50% mark and more than 65% of our renewable energy is coming from renewable energy. So that is an achievement in itself. And Karnataka is not just home to renewable energy in terms of power, which is the regular source of energy. We are also home to the largest ethanol manufacturer in all of Asia. That is our group called True Alt Bioenergy. So the kind of, like our ACS sir, Kumar Nayak sir said, is we have a very strong bureaucracy that supports all, especially the new innovations that are there in the world. And we were one of the first states that promoted ethanol, promoted the agro-based industry, and a company like ours, that is MRN Group, we were merely a sugar industry. And from the sugar industry, there are potentials to create many renewable sources of energy, ranging from the bagasse that comes out. We use bagasse to generate cogeneration. We have about 230 megawatts of cogeneration there. Then, other than that, we have got something called as the molasses that comes out. Molasses is a very good source of ethanol. And we are producing ethanol. Karnataka was one of the first states in the country, in spite of being the third largest sugar manufacturer. We were one of the first states in the country to produce ethanol from bio-syrup. That is what Minister Gadkari ji had promised. I mean, it was his vision since early. So 2018 is when the national biofuel policy came in, and 2019 onwards, there were more than 14 ethanol plants in the state of Karnataka. And I'm proud to say that Karnataka is house to Asia's largest ethanol field. And other than that, so you spoke of 2G ethanol as well, Karthik. So in 2G ethanol, Shell has one of its first plants set up near the Aero Park and Defense, near the airport here. So they've set up a 2G ethanol plant on a pilot basis, where a 10 KLPD of 2G ethanol is being generated or produced using bagasse as raw material. So that transition to the availability of ethanol is becoming a reality, and it is becoming a reality. We have recently heard the Honorable Prime Minister come on and say that the vision that was there to blend 20% of ethanol by 2030 has been preponed to 2025. So that's the speed that India is moving towards, especially with the green energy. And that 2025 vision is being achieved in 2023 only. As of last ethanol supply year, there was almost about 18% of ethanol blending that happened. And now there was a question if there was a question earlier whether India will be able to produce so much of ethanol. Now we are in a situation where almost the 20% blending mark is achieved, and industries are saying, will the government take more ethanol? So ethanol is a reality. It is here in a large quantity. So very recently, Toyota launched its flex fuel vehicles, and many countries already have flex engines. And it is coming to Karnataka now, India now. And again, to say Karnataka is leading the way, Toyota Kirloskar, that is again housed in Karnataka, has launched a flex fuel engine. So I must say that Karnataka has given huge incentives to innovation. It has given huge policy benefits to any innovators. And I'm happy that we are a Karnataka-bred industry, ranging from power, ethanol. We also produce bio-CNG, which is coming from single source, that is sugarcane. So there are multiple products that can be created, and we are creating it.
Great. Thank you, Vijay. So, given that Vijay has painted a very rosy picture of what ethanol is going to do in the future, let me pose the next tough question now back to Vijay. Vijay, ethanol, at least in the northern Indian belt and in places where water is a plenty, is slowly started showing some of the problems that it also brings. The common term that's used is the food, energy, water nexus, right? Which is, should we be cultivating, something which is electricity intensive in places where you rely on groundwater, which is pumped using electricity that's provided from the grid to generate, water for the sugarcane fields, and then extract energy back out of it? Seems like there's a bit of a loss of energy there, right? So, which is why I asked you about 2G. And how are we looking at this panning out in the future, right? I think the leader in ethanol so far in the world today, bioethanol, is Brazil. And we know that they've had their fair share of problems with the way things have panned out for the environment. So do you see that India has a different way in which it can handle whether it's sugarcane-based ethanol? And if not, what do you see as the option?
That's one of my favorite questions, Karthik. So this is a question that is poised everywhere, right? So the availability of sugar and availability of food grains as against consuming food grains for energy. So let me tell you, sugarcane is a product, that's a capital product, right? It's a commercial crop. So sugarcane is one of the products that has good value or good rate. There is an MSP that is there, and availability of sugarcane. So if you look at the quantum of area used to cultivate sugarcane has not increased two times. Whereas the production of sugar has increased almost 2 times from 2000 onwards in the last 20 years. So there is a lot of vertical growth of crop that is happening. So there is technological innovation that is happening with crop, wherein the crop, per acre yield is increased from 20 tons back in the day to almost 45 tons. We have a club called 100 Ton Cane Growers Club, where the farmers are growing up to 100 tons of sugarcane per acre. And that is using the latest technologies like drip irrigation and the best sources of organic fertilizers and all of these. See, another one thing is India is a nation of high potential of many resources like minerals. So just in the place that we come from, we have got multiple dams which was built by the government of Karnataka. We've got we've got 2 rivers that are flowing in my geographical area. So the water, if it is not used judiciously, it is going to go back into the ocean. So it has to be used, right? The groundwater along with the water that is there in the river, it has to be used. We have to create energy from it rather than exploiting the earth and, harnessing crude from the ground or harnessing coal or any other sources of energy from the ground and unleashing the carbon into the atmosphere and increasing the, temperature of the globe. It is better to reuse the carbon that is already there in the planet, right? So the carbon that is coming out of, ethanol, when it burns, it gives out a little amount of carbon. That is one of the least amounts of carbons. That same carbon is consumed by the plants, that is sugarcane. So because carbon dioxide is required by sugarcane to grow. That same carbon dioxide is consumed, we again harvest the same sugarcane, and that same sugarcane is used as fuel. So I see very less amount of carbon being emitted, and judicious use of water, that is a very mindful thing to have. And coming to the point of Brazil, right? So the world has a ecosystem of where there is in India, it is a 6-year cycle that we call it in the sugar industry, where we have very good, 2 years of very good and ample amount of rains. We have 2 years of moderate rains, and we have 2 years of very bad rains where we go trouble the government and we sit with Mr. Nayak sir to help us out and stuff like that. So making judicial use of water is a very, very important thing, and I think the world is doing that now.
All right, certainly food for thought, on that, Vijay. Adlan, I'll come to you next. You guys have obviously, decided to take the plunge and invest in India. So far, of course, India does not have the full ecosystem to support the generation of hydrogen in a big way. So presumably, you're bringing in technology from the outside to help get that plant started. So what do you see as the choice of technology for hydrogen going forward for a country like India? You're cost conscious. So there's this option between PEM electrolyzers and alkaline electrolyzers. India has an ecosystem of PEM. Colleagues there at Reliance also have experience in that. What is Petronas guiding towards and pointing to the future in terms of what India should pursue?
Thank you. The hydrogen technology is not actually new technology. The alkali electrolyzer has been around for more than 50 years. It's true, there are new variations of PEM or even solid oxide coming in. But these are still in development phase. I think PEM is slightly more advanced, yeah. But I think we have to work with what we have. So the alkali electrolyzer is a proven technology. The most important thing is we can produce hydrogen at the lowest unit cost, yeah. But this goes back again to what is the cost of round-the-clock renewable electricity. At the end of the day, I think 70 to 80% of the cost of hydrogen actually is from the tariff of the renewable energy. Ammonia, of course, that's another old technology. I think well proven. There's only 4 or 5 strong players around the world. And it is definitely something that we can put together. And India has got all the components to make this happen. We also see some of the electrolyzer companies actually setting shop to manufacture in India, recognizing how big this hydrogen industry can be. But our real challenge is really the customers. Are they actually ready to pay the premium for green hydrogen, green ammonia? There's a lot of customers indicating willingness to buy, but I think the challenge is still actually trying to land to where is that sweet spot between all the investments that we have to make green ammonia available and the readiness of the customer to actually sign a long-term contract in order to take these projects to the bank. I think that will be a very big challenge. But India's got no problems. I think as far as a production center, I think we are at the right place.
Great. Mr. Nayak, I'm just going to maybe turn to you very briefly on this point that Adlan has raised. I mean, I'm sure as a bureaucrat who's sort of trying to manage the energy system, you would have seen this. And he talks about a very important point. What is the willingness of Indian consumers, whether it's industry, right, commercial or even households, to pay the right price of energy to enable this clean energy transition? At the end of the day, it's going to happen at the pace at which they want to drive it. So from a perspective of somebody who's constantly looking at keeping the people happy and various stakeholders happy, what do you see as this, eventually will India go past this, barrier with price, or will that remain the biggest challenge for India to make this transition going forward?
We can expect that the customers would be highly price sensitive. Definitely, they would be worried about what would happen to their the final cost and things like that. As a householder also, we are very concerned with how much we pay for the electricity. It was a great concern as far as the RE is concerned to begin with, about 7, 8 years back. Today, for the sheer scale and the technological innovations have driven down the cost substantially. So all of a sudden, solar and wind is proving to be extremely competitive, or a cheaper version of thermal power. Thermal power is not only polluting, but it is picking my pocket too, as on today. So RE can be very, very cost effective. So if you deploy them in various possibilities like green hydrogen or green ammonia, maybe to begin with the cost will be higher. And there will be some kind of a resistance by the industry. Maybe once again the scale, innovation, all these things will come into play, and perhaps we can hope for much better acceptance of these initiatives. Nobody thought that people would now go to solarize the agricultural activities. So the entire agriculture sector in Karnataka has been subsidized by the non-agricultural consumers and the government. We pay next to nothing as far as agricultural consumption is concerned.
Right.
But today we can give them the cheapest of power because of the possibility of RE, solar, and that is sheer technological innovation and the possibility. So we hope for such things to come in the coming years. And for that, we look forward to you all.
Great. Thank you. I think it's a very important point that we heard from Mr. Nayak there, which is technology holds the power to basically bring down the cost. And, you know,
To add a couple of points before, because as on today, we have systems to handle electrical power. We don't have systems which are developed for all other things. So next step would be how to reduce the carbon footprint in other areas like hydrogen and ammonia-based industries. That will be for internal consumption. Even for that also, the electrical system should be got ready. Transmission capabilities, transformation capability, all these things have to be upgraded. And they need to be evacuated at some point and delivered at some point. All these things are there. Apart from that, what the picture that is painted in front of us, the vision, not the picture, not the vision for the country, is that the country should become a net exporter of energy. That's something even bigger, Just imagine, not only we consume, we are self-sufficient, and also we need to export energy. That requires an electrical system or a network which is much higher, and perhaps that will be a huge challenge for the electrical engineers and the systems. To expect the society or all of our clients to bear the burden of, not the burden, the facilitation of banking and other things is not very comfortable. So it will be a huge cost on them. So it has to be managed in such a way that in spite of putting up huge facilities, it is possible to produce cheap hydrogen or cheap energy so that we can actually become net exporters of energy.
Thank you, Mr. Nayak. Kapil, with that, I'll come to you. Obviously, when we look at technological innovation, we all look at the way Reliance has done it for telecom, right? You've brought down the prices. Everybody now has data at the cheapest rates in the world, and thanks in no small part to Jio and what you did. So, is there a similar revolution underway I know the PLI scheme, for instance, that Reliance has won for solar as well as battery manufacturing in the first round, has sort of tried to catalyze that. In your sense, in your understanding, what are the further demand-side incentives that Government of India can put together to help drive the cost of technologies for electrolyzer manufacturing in India, right? And to basically get the full chain of solar in India. Even for solar, as you know, PLI doesn't really, has not really got takers at the very end of the spectrum. We're still going to rely on China a little bit. Do you think India will get there with the incentives from the government? And what do you think would be the main ask that you have for government from there?
So I'll comment, Karthik, on the first aspect, that what PLI has bring in a difference. So we all need to understand and appreciate that 80% of our solar for last 12 years we were importing from a single country. So what change it has bring is, for solar module, what we see as an end product, the only manufacturing facilities available in India was for solar cell and module. Where if you talk of the whole value chain, it starts from quartz, which is your standard silica. You convert it to metallurgical silicon, to polysilicon, to ingot, wafer, cell, and then module. So we at a country level was only having facilities for cell and module. For the first time, there are announcements done by large conglomerates, and many of them, including Reliance, win the bid for PLI to make this whole system self-sustainable. That why we don't make it in India, for India, and possibly for the world also. So we are talking of a technology which is far ahead of what possibly that single country is already working on. And at a scale where we can, if not compete, at least stand on par and say that we have the entire ecosystem built for that. So the way I would say our company is looking at it, Karthik, is in a very holistic way, that how do you look at this whole ecosystem rather than looking at every single element on its own. So when you talk of the ecosystem, it is that we are coming up with 4 gigafactories. And when I talk of these gigafactories first is the solar polysilicon to module, so that's solar module gigafactory. The second one is for battery storage, where we've already done some tie-ups, acquisitions, and for the first time possibly we acquired a company which is Faradian, which is on sodium ion. So looking at it from perspective that where country was lacking, from perspective that if we don't have lithium reserves, can we look at alternate chemistries and technologies to build capacities in India and build capacity at a pace and technology level readiness, which is not seen possibly in past at the country. So that's another factory which is with the advanced chemistry battery cells. So for both phase 1 of solar, we won the PLI, which was for the completely vertically integrated from polysilicon to module. And then second, battery cells, PLI also we won. The third gigafactory which we are talking is the electrolyzers factory. So there we will produce what you also spoke on, how do we convert this renewable power to green hydrogen through an electrolysis process. And then the fourth one from the value chain is, how do we use that once this green hydrogen? So one of the application possibly would be converting it back to electricity from fuel cells. So, FCFEs, which are typically fuel cells EVs, where you would use hydrogen for mobility application. So these are 4 gigafactories which we are looking at. And for the first time, such a thing would happen possibly globally, that all this is co-located at one single location. And all of that manufacturing will happen in a place called Dhirubhai Ambani New Energy Complex in Jamnagar, Gujarat. So this is the way we're looking at more holistically the manufacturing or the upstream aspect of it. The second one would be on the production. So we would be doing possibly 100 gigawatt of solar power or the renewable energy production. And that is also at a scale which, if you talk of 2030, could be around 500 gigawatt of country's target is around 1/5 of the country's target from that perspective. And also then look at every single element in the whole value chain from storage, transportation. So the whole key lies in how do you look at small things. So when you are saying production of solar module, how do you make sure that you are ahead or at least on par with the most advanced technology player globally? So you look at manufacturing of aluminum frames, you look at manufacturing of glass, you look at manufacturing of EVA or POE. So possibly more elements what goes in manufacturing of the whole value chain or ecosystem would be looked at from that perspective. On a demand side, your question is, demand was never a problem in India, I would say. It was always on the supply side where we had a gap, and that is where we are bridging that gap. I would say for us to come to an 500 gigawatt as a national target, we are more or less on track of that. For whatever said and done, India is already doing 10 to 15 gigawatt of solar. Of course, in wind, the production has little bit reduced, but that's not a larger challenge. We have all the capabilities to ramp even the solar to 20-25 gigawatt for us to achieve that target as in country. Demand side, I don't see there will be a larger challenge, and supply is where we are bridging the gap. And even in the whole sector, when you ask Venu, I think it's going forward, it largely be how do you, even the energy companies would look like, how do you manage the supply and demand together? So, it's the balance what you need to create, and the grid is resilient compared to many other countries,
Yep.
You talk of those island countries, they are like, the grid scale there is possibly not even one state what we have. So, if such a large grid is managed, it's quite resilient, I would say.
Great. Actually, thank you for pointing me in the direction of Venu there. Venu, I have a very interesting question for you from what Kapil has just said. Everybody looks at supply side solutions, right? Build more RE, integrate more RE, try and supply when the consumer wants it. But at the same time, the talk, at least in Europe, is now on how do we manage the demand better. And of course, for that, the utility operators and the power plants have to be a lot more responsive to the needs of a flexible demand system, right? So how is India preparing, at least on the utility side? I'm not sure whether you have consumers on the distribution side, but what are the technologies that you see that are being deployed globally where perhaps India could take like a page from their book to try and drive the way consumers think of consuming energy at different times during the day? How do we drive their consumption patterns? So on demand side management, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So thank you, Karthik. I think this is very, very good, interesting question. We need both, supply side management and supply side more capacity has come in and more capacity to take care of the future. Because as I told you, the future is not an incremental growth. It is a factor. When you are reaching the factor, then you need to also plan everything both in terms of the supply side and demand side. And a lot of new digital technology has need to come in if you're really talking about the demand side management in that. Take for example, I happen to be in one of the cities in Japan. There the consumer will get, if you are shifting your load by 1 hour, you'll get a 10% discount on your electrical charge. That's a way the consumers start getting the information in that. So this is all the demand management. Here also, if you shift your peak by 1 hour, there's a huge amount of burden comes down on the distribution companies, etc. So this is the next stage of the demand side management. But today, if you're really talking about India's commitment in the COP26, 50% of the renewable by 2030, we are not talking about a very far away. We are only few years from now. That needs a huge amount of capacity addition to come in, and the grid resilience has to come in. Grid resilience in terms of talking about the HVDC technology, power quality technologies, and the digitalization, asset management, and the predictive analysis. All these things has to built in as part of the distribution network, whether it is the government-owned utilities or the private-owned utilities. If the technology is built in, then the demand side management is very easy. It's running using nowadays artificial intelligence, machine learning. The various technologies are coming, and there's a very good examples to talk about new technologies to deploy it by the thing. I give you one example. Recently, we have launched globally what we call a vegetation management. So the companies, distribution companies, transmission companies, they always have a challenge on the managing the transmission line. Then the vegetation will go up. Due to that, there is a tripping of that. So using your various technologies, we can predict where is the vegetation management coming, how to cut those vegetation management, so that the resilience and the reliability of the grid can be increased in that. So all these technologies once will come in, demand side management would be coming appropriately on this, Karthik.
Right. So I actually have a smart plug at home, which has been installed on a test basis, where my air conditioner gets controlled by somebody else, right, for about 15 minutes to about 30 minutes in the evenings, just to see how much am I able to sort of not use the air conditioner, assuming that, the peak in Delhi, for instance, happens in that 6:37 period, right? So far, because I'm part of the experiment, I've been playing with them. But eventually, if it comes to a commercial decision, will I do it or not, is a different question. But hopefully, more people will take to this and understand that it's really in the way we have to shift our energy consumption and the way we consume energy that will play an equal role in driving this transition. So we are about 10 minutes to the close of the session. So I have a set of themes that I want to cover across the different people that are present here. I'll start with Kapil. With Vijay. Vijay, you are in the biomass industry, which speaks to farming, which is one of the largest employers in the economy. And obviously, farming today is not seen as a big source of income, right? As much as the Prime Minister has been talking about doubling farmer incomes, we know that it's a profession everybody wants to get out of. So with the prospect of bioenergy becoming big, do you see the ability of the farming sector to contribute to value addition and jobs in a big way? Or do you see that automation is sort of really not going to enable that and it will go the route of, the way other energy systems have gone?
Yeah. Karthik, I must say I really like all your questions. So this is again one of my favorites. So when we speak of agro-based industries, right? And when the Prime Minister or the Government of India as well as the Government of Karnataka speaks of doubling farmers' income and, Atmanirbhar, self-resilience and all of these. So especially in the sugar sector, right? So when we speak of doubling farmers' income, there are two methods to increasing the farmers' income. One is increasing their revenue. Number two is decreasing their cost. So when we do two of these is when the income increases or the profits for them increases. So we in the MRN Group have been doing this by multiple methods. See, number one, what we do is the sugarcane that comes to us. So this is not just in the sugar sector. This is across many grain-based industries as well, right? Just by taking in sugarcane, what we do is the sugarcane juice earlier was just one or two products were made. Now there are about 16 different products, and net there are more than 36 identified products that can be generated. you know, the range of these products varies from just different kinds of sugar power that we spoke of, ethanol that we are doing, 2G ethanol using bagasse. Then there is bio-CNG using the press mud. I'll tell you a very fun story about press mud, right? An absolute waste product that comes out. It is the mud that is there in the sugarcane. When you let sugarcane juice let sediment, there is a mud that settles in the bottom. So that mud has a lot of hydrogen. It has got a lot of methane, to be precise, right? So what we do is there is a Satat scheme that Government of India has come forward. And I keep saying this, that there are three main important aspects for any transition or anything to happen. Number one is the market. As Mr. Maheshwari mentioned, that India is one of the biggest consumer market in the world with 1.4 billion population. Number two is the technology. And number three is the policy. So India already has one of the biggest markets. Number two, the technology of harnessing biogas or methane or ethanol has been there since 20 or 25 years now. Number three is policy. Policy, Government of India has opened up. I think we truly are in the Amrut Kal, where especially in a state like ours, it gives me great pride that we are in a state that has double engine sarkar, where we have got ample support left, right and center, right? So here what we do with the press mud is we harness the bio-CNG that we have, and the bio-CNG is given to the farmers to be used in their tractors. We have already started converting more than 18 tractors in our fields. So what we do is the tractor becomes a dual feed engine, where it can either be used as a diesel engine or it can be used as a CNG engine. So cost of CNG or bio-CNG is almost 60-65 rupees today, or if you look at the Satat price, it's about 54 rupees, the revised price. Whereas the cost of diesel, the real cost of diesel is 110 rupees.
Sure.
So there is a huge saving. So what happens is the farmer is consuming the fuel which is coming from a product that he's produced. Again, it is going back to him to consume in his vehicle for manufacturing that same produce again, number one. In this cycle, he is saving half of his expenditure. So where is 110 and where is 54 rupees the allocated Satat price? It's less than half, right? So saving is earning, number one. Like I said earlier, right? So earning by saving is through this mechanism of cost reduction. And the other thing is the technology in India, thanks to many researchers like you, have enhanced the productivity of agriculture, where the yield per acreage was about 25 to 30 metric tons, has now increased to almost 100 metric tons. So when we speak of doubling...
I'm cognizant of time. Sorry, I understand. Since you're going back to the same point, I'm going to cut you here, Vijay. But the broad point that I wanted you to address, which I think is a much bigger one, is that agriculture is not a preferred profession anymore in many parts of the country, right? Especially, for instance, in the big grain belts. So we have to ensure that as this transition happens, we find a way to employ all of them. And in your case, I think the opportunity is phenomenal. But I'll give you an opportunity maybe to respond outside of this, but we'll move to the other panelists for now. Adlan, I'll come to you next. As a foreign entity that's looking to invest in India, is the source of capital been a problem for you in terms of where you raise it and the access to it on account of the risks that you see in the Indian market? Or do you see that there's ample appetite within the Indian ecosystem to fund such new infrastructure?
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're going to have to work hard for the sources. Again, when you talk about making a project bankable, it's about how much of the offtake can you actually secure upfront. During the final investment decision, we have to decide how many percent firm offtake are we ready to accept before deciding to invest further. And this ties closely to how we find financing. But I'm starting to believe that because the green ammonia, green hydrogen market is so new, that speed to the market is of the essence. If you are able to be the first one in the market, then I think people are willing to pay a higher premium in order to get the product. So are we willing to take more risk before actually deciding to make a final investment decision? So these are the things that we're still trying to figure out. And there will come a time where there will be a lot of supply. But it's about, this first to market type of situation that we are really thinking about now.
So you have not had a problem because you're first to market so far. Okay.
I wouldn't say that, but we try.
I'm going to move to Kapil then next. Kapil, I think because you have manufacturing, the rain's really heavy. I can't hear myself right now. So because you have manufacturing ambitions in India, the big question in everybody's mind is, does India have all the resources to manufacture the technologies that it needs within? You gave us a beautiful example of solar where you have the quads pretty much in the sand that we have, but you have to process it. But in the case of newer tech, right, whether it's batteries, whether it's electrolyzers, PEM electrolyzers, there are novel materials that India does not have. So how does a group like Reliance sort of try and work with the global value chains to secure that for India? Do you see that as a problem, or you don't see that as a problem in the horizon that you're currently seeing?
So any new technology, I would say first, keeping outside material. Thankfully, rain has slowed down when I'm speaking. So any new technology, possibly you would see, even take an example of green hydrogen. You talk of any large technical consultants available globally for green hydrogen. I can name 10 of them. Most of them would have a base in India with their manpower working in India for global offices. So I wouldn't say that technical know-how and skilled manpower would be a larger challenge. Second, if there isn't technology which is not available, India has sufficiently large offtake available and export opportunities available, because of which it will definitely have access to acquisition of that technology. And that's how, many of these announcements you would be seeing in newspaper every now and then by large Indian conglomerates towards acquisition of technologies or forming JVs, And to that extent, there is a good amount of interest from other countries also coming to India. And we have one gentleman on the dais also, and figuring out how we can do something in India and within technical know-hows which are available either through an JV or an Indian partner, or themselves establishing a system. So that on technology, I don't see a much larger challenge which we will have. I'm not saying that we have all the technologies available as on today. We are yet to go very far by the time we reach there. And on materials, there is no country which has all the materials. There is no country which is self-sufficient in possibly all materials. We would definitely have some problems because of some geopolitical relations, etc., in sourcing some material. And this is the reason we can always look at some alternate materials which could suffice our purpose, at the same time provide us the right technology access. And that's the reason I gave the example of sodium-ion batteries as well.
Right. So diversifying away to different technology is one solution that you're looking at.
Definitely.
Okay, fantastic. And for you, Venu, the last question, it's a poll question for you. India, 175 gigawatts was supposed to happen by end of this year. Probably, I don't know, a lot of people will say we're almost there. There's, 50 gigawatt under construction, whatever, right? But truth is, we didn't get there. The next target is 500 gigawatt by 2030. Do you think we'll get there? And if you think we should get there, and the scale of addition that's required is a phenomenal pace of nearly 20 to 25 gigawatt every year. What's the main thing that India should address as it looks to build and scale up at this pace of growth, Venu? Yeah.
I think, thank you, Karthik. The question is not that whether we get there. The question is that how do we get there? That will be the right question in my view. Okay. It's a very clear, if you miss this 500 gigawatt target, then our government's commitment, Honorable Prime Minister's commitment at the COP26, that by 2071 we want to be net zero as a country, we probably will miss that. So it's extremely important that we got to get this, that 50% of our energy requirements by 2030 should met through the renewable. So that's a bigger picture in that. To do that, we need to do more than 2 to 3 times what we have been doing now. So if you really look at in the last 4 or 5 years, except the COVID year, we are adding to 10 to 12 gigawatt worth of renewable per year in this country. We need to do at least 2.5 times more than that. But we have to do that. So we do have a lot of roadblocks. For example, the PV panels not available. We have to buy it from China. The rest of the things, whether the capital, the manpower, and the material is a crucial thing. And we do have certain challenges. But the good part is that both the central government as well as the state government is bringing a lot of enabling policies to use the industries to can use those enabling policy to do that. PLF is a one such thing, and Reliance is another example of setting up a gigawatt scale PV panels. We also seeing Adani setting up a gigawatt scale PV panels. That will come. That won't happen overnight, but there is a will, there is a commitment from the government as the industries we need to look at. End of the day, what we need is we need a sustainable future, not only for our generation, but generations to come. If that needs to happen means the renewable, green energy, everything has to come and happen. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Venu, for that. I see lots of hands going up. I'm not sure whether we actually have time or plan for it. I'll let the MC sort of respond to it. But thank you, Mr. Nayak, for patiently hearing us all out. And thank you to all the panelists here for patiently responding to the questions. Thank you.
Thanks once again. Please be seated. Sorry, time's up because we have another session now. So hope you're going to understand. Extremely sorry for that. Okay, and may we request once again Gunjan Krishna ma'am to kindly come up on the dais to thank all our eminent speakers. And indeed, this was a power-packed session, really energizing us. So a big round of applause to thank all of them. Mr. Vijay Nirani, MD, MRN Group. Mr. Adlan Ahmad, CEO of Petronas Hydrogen. Karthik Ganesan, our moderator. Mr. Kumar Nayak, sir, Additional Chief Secretary, Energy Department, Government of Karnataka. MD, CEO of Hitachi Energy in India and SA, Shri Venu Nuguri. And also with us, Leader Renewable Energy at RIL, Shri Kapil Maheshwari. Once again, loads of thanks to each one of you for making it happen for us and Invest Karnataka Global Investors Meet 2022. Thank you so much, and we request all the delegates and participants